Okay, let's get started. I want to welcome you to Gray Associates Higher Education Demand Trends webinar for April. I would like to welcome Dr. Jay Cowell, Vice Provost of Assessment at Augustana University. He will be joining Bob Atkins, Gray's CEO, Program Evaluation Expert, and best-selling higher education author. A few housekeeping items to get started with. At the bottom of your Zoom screen, there is a place labeled Q&A. Please feel free to add your questions there. We will get to as many as we can during this session, and we will follow up later with you if we do run out of time for your questions. Have you been wondering about launching a particular new program or what the potential job market looks like for your students? At the end of the presentation, we will give you the opportunity to review programs in real time with PES and Gray's Director of Customer Success. You can pop your questions, your program requests into the Q&A at any time during the presentation. And now, without further ado, I will turn things over to Bob.
Thank you very much, Marianne, and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today and taking time out of your busy days to hear a little bit about what's going on out there in the market for higher education. As was mentioned, I'm joined today by Jay. Thank you very much for being with us today, Jay. If you want to take a second and just introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, team at Gray, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. I appreciate your presence here. It's truly a gift for you to take time to talk and learn a little bit today about how we use PES on our campus, and then essentially, as Bob's going to go into the data for this last month. So thank you very much.
So we've been using this word PES, or PES. As I prefer to call it. What the devil is a PES? Well, it's a program evaluation system, and that starts with data and software. The data includes data on markets, what students want, what employers need, margins, how much money does this program make, and can it pay for itself, or does it need to be subsidized by other higher margin programs? Academic standards, are we graduating students? Are they doing well in our courses? And are they passing exams in their areas, especially after graduation for licensure? And finally, mission, and probably most important is mission. And all these factors play into whether you can afford to sustain your mission over time. So in particular with margins, it's not that you're for profit. The question is, can you generate the margins you need to sustain the mission? And that's why we keep track of that for academic programs. But the data is not enough on its own. In addition to data, you need to bring the data to the right people in the right process so that they can use their judgment to make better program decisions. Sad to say there's no algorithm that'll do this for you yet. A little scary how close we probably are to being able to do that. Not so much Gray specifically, but us, the technology is just unbelievable. So we'll talk a little bit about that later on in the presentation. But for now, we people have not been displaced by AI, and you do need to be involved to bring the right context, knowledge of your local markets and students into the process to interpret the data and make program decisions. Now let's take a look at student demand. This is in itself a different way of looking at the world. Many people focus in program evaluation strictly on employment. And while employment is important, it is not the only thing. And your margins are fundamentally driven by students who pay the bills. So it behooves us to pay attention to what students want, or else we may launch programs or continue programs where there's really not much student interest. And I've seen that happen in significant ways. One of my clients spent $500,000 on an optics lab, only to have 5 students show up in the program. So you do need to understand student demand. There are a number of indicators of student demand. They vary from Google to enrollment data, and there'll be one other I'll touch on in a second. Some of those are very forward-looking. Google is actually telling you what students are looking for now, who won't apply or enroll for 6 to 12 months. So it's not looking out 5 years, but it will give you a sense of what people are going to be interested in the next few academic semesters. Enrollment's very current, a little bit backwards looking. The most current data is from, let's see, fall 2022. So it's telling us what students wanted then. And then we have the traditional source, which is iPads. And iPad's really a beating to a different drummer. Great information if you just want to know who the competition is. Not so great if you want to know what trends are. That's because the most current data is actually, it was published in 2021. And people chose their majors 3 to 6 years before that. So we're really looking at data that's from something like 2018 back to 2015. So it's really out of date in terms of what's going on in student demand. Again, a good general indicator, but not good for understanding trends in demand. So with that, let's take a look at our forward-looking indicator, which is Google. Good news here, Google's up 6% year over year in the month of March. And as you can see, it was up in February and January as well. The light blue lines or aqua lines are 2023. The darker line, the dark blue line is 2022, and the light blue is 2021. So nice 3-year growth here in the month of March. And March is slightly below January, but otherwise up there with the best months over the last 12 months. So that's pretty encouraging to see both growth and a high level of absolute volume of Google searches. Now, what was growing? Well, pretty eclectic field here, actually. We've got one clear trend. You'll hear it throughout the presentation, and that is data and technology, or data technology itself is growing at a good clip. And there are a number of different things we'll call out there. Do keep in mind that I don't mean IT per se, and a number of other things that are specific program names. Rather, it's all things associated with data technology. And here, what we can see is cybersecurity is one of the top 3 programs. Computer science makes the top 10. Data analytics, you'll hear this over and over again as we go through the presentation, in March was one of the top 10 programs in terms of total keyword volume. The top 2 are perennials. Registered nursing is almost always number 1 or 2, and business administration, flips slots with registered nursing typically. Between the 2 of them, they're the larger programs in the United States. Law is in the top 10, marketing, psychology, social work, and criminal justice general. So we've got 3 pretty specific programs, 7 that are more generally scattered across the curriculum, if you will. Now, what's growing? Digital marketing, up 96%. I'll go through our others here. There are 4 of them. Marketing management, so two in marketing actually, criminal justice and organizational leadership, all up over 40% in Google search volumes. So think of that as an expression of potential interest coming up next year and the year after. Then we have our data and technology. Cybersecurity makes the fastest growing list. And here's AI again, up 63%. And then we have everything else. Then we have some health programs. And honestly, I'm surprised to see these as low as they are. We've only got 4 on the list: surge tech, phys ed, substance abuse, and registered nursing. And these used to be pretty perennial, up in the top 10, and really towards the very top of the list often for nursing. So it's not going down, don't get me wrong, it's up 31%, but it's not dominating the list the way it used to. What we tend to see now is these AI data and cybersecurity programs up towards the very top. Let's take a look at what's going on in the master space. And here we're looking at total enrollment. That is all the students in school who were enrolled at that time, not just the new enrolls. This has been going up for a number of years, right into 2021 in the middle of COVID. And then we see the impact of COVID, I think, coming into 2022 with a 4.7% decline in enrollment that year. So a little bit disappointing. Master's total enrollment in data analytics or data science, fastest growing program. I mentioned we'd see a lot of this data stuff. Here we've got 5 out of the top 10 programs, all data and technology related. Data analytics leading the pack with 57% growth year over year. IT project management up 38%. Here's AI again, up 30%. Electrical and computer engineering up 24%. And computer science itself up 21%. So an awful lot of computer science, data science related things that are very hot at the master's level. Education is up as well, 35% increase in enrollment in special education programs at the master's level, and 28% increase in elementary education. And then we have a couple of oddballs, in the other category. Construction engineering up 31%, psychiatric mental health nursing up 25%, and mechatronics, robotics, automation engineering up 25%. I will say, I think there's a long-term trend here in terms of mental health that we're seeing both at the program level and we've seen pretty regularly show up on our list of top 10 jobs as well in terms of job postings. So one to keep an eye on along with our data analytics and data science. It's not quite as prevalent in this month's results, but it has been in the past. That's psychiatric mental health nursing. That's again here, but not quite as pervasive as we've seen it in prior presentations. Now, the decline in fall bachelor's enrollment accelerated. So this is new enrollment in fall at the total enrollment in the fall at the bachelor's level. You can see it was puttering along down a little bit, 0.4%, down 0.3%, then took a jump in 2020 to a drop, I should say, to minus 2.1%, minus 2.2% 2022. So unfortunately, at the bachelor's level, the decline in enrollment is actually picking up speed. What's doing well in that environment? Well, here it is again, data analytics or data science. You've got cybersecurity up in the top 2, business analytics, a variation on data analytics as number 3, and computer programming as number 4. So that whole data and technology space took 4 of the top 10 slots in bachelor's enrollment growth. Then we have an eclectic group of things after that: applied psychology, digital arts, sustainability studies, exercise physiology, and econometrics, all up 10% or more. And the bottom of our top 10, up 9%, is architectural, building sciences, tech. Now, all of us have been thinking about non-degree courses, and what we'll share with you is what the bigger courses are out there and what's growing in the non-degree space. I do think as you consider these, the trick here is not what's hot. The trick is how do you do this in a way that's financially sustainable. The challenge is that it costs a lot of money to acquire a student for a non-degree course. But the course itself only lasts 6 weeks and generally is only going to cost a few $100s. So figuring out how to enter this space from a financial perspective can be very tricky. And do keep that in mind. If you want to do it for free, there's a lot of opportunity out there. If you want to actually have a sustainable financial model for this, that's a lot trickier. So what's going on? This month, we're going to share Coursera, and this is cumulative course enrollment since the inception of the individual course on Coursera. So keep in mind, this is years and years of data for some of these courses. The most popular course in the history of Coursera is the Science of Wellbeing, with 4.4 million students who have enrolled. Cautionary note: just because people enroll doesn't mean it's like enrolling in a course or a program. Folks come in here, I would say probably 9 out of 10 will drop off before the end of the first class or by the end of the first class session. So, it's not really comparable to your enrollment numbers, but it is comparable, one of these courses to another within Coursera. Learning how to learn, number 2. And then we get some tech programs, programming for everybody, foundations, data everywhere, financial markets, which is not really data and technology, my apologies, and technical support fundamentals. All making the list. Health, and here I would call it health and related subjects, including mental health, science of well-being, topping the list, introduction to psychology, COVID-19 training. I'm really looking forward to that dropping off this list. But this is the cumulative history, so it'll be here for a while until it's displaced by somebody else. As I say, looking forward to that not being an issue for all of us anymore. We have a couple of others: learning how to learn, English for career development, and successful negotiation strategies. As we think about what's growing on Coursera, we take the historical numbers and we keep track on a monthly basis so we can see what growth occurred in enrollment in the prior month, in this case, March 2023. And here we see data and technology very high up, number 1 and number 2, project management, I think is generally going to be a tech project management. UX design and tech support fundamentals and programming with Python. So a lot of growth in that data and tech space. Science of Wellbeing didn't do too shabby either, up 496,000 enrolls. But it's dropped back from that number 1 slot now to number 3. And then other things, writing in the sciences, which I don't recall noticing before. English for career development's been a perennial. Ask questions to make data-driven decisions, and financial markets is the last slot. Now let's switch gears and take a look at employment. As I mentioned, we shouldn't be looking at this in isolation, but that's not to say that employment isn't important and probably equal to student demand in its importance in your identifying programs that may be attractive for your institutions. Very important to be sure your graduates get jobs. News here looks really bad at first, down 31% year over year in March. But I think the real story is a little more optimistic than that. It's actually up month over month versus February, about even with January, and above October, November, December of last year. So the overall story is fine. I would say it's healthy. I am a little concerned looking forward. All of you may see it in the papers today that GDP only rose 1.1% last month. So it's beginning to taper off. And as that happens, I expect we'll see a decline in job postings. But we've been short of people for so long that it would take a pretty substantial decline in the economy to actually get a balance between job postings and the number of people who are available for those jobs. So I think this will stay a pretty healthy job market until we're probably well into a recession. In March, in terms of the job postings by occupation, general and operations managers led the pack, and management really did very well here. Human resources specialists, marketing managers, management analysts, and financial managers, all in our top 10 in terms of job postings. We have a little bit in sales, retail salespersons, and sales managers, 2 of the top 10, and then a variety of other things. Registered nursing, not surprising. That's been in the top 10 for a very long time. Customer user support specialists, and sales reps, wholesale and manufacturing. What's growing? This is a really interesting list this month, all sorts of strange things. Loan officers, human resource specialists. I think this is us catching up with all the hiring that had to be done coming out of COVID, still going on, I think, at many companies. In management, we also have marketing managers, computer and systems managers, and management analysts. So we have a little bit of a boom and a need for management level talent. Then we have industrial engineers, insurance agents, market research, human resources assistants, and finally a little bit of sales makes the list, retail salespersons. Again, probably a little bit of a post-recovery play for people to work in retail environments. Now let me hand it over to Jay, who'll talk us through the program of the month. Oh, I better stop sharing if Jay's gonna.
Real quick. There we go. Everybody's able to see the agenda? All right. Yes, thank you, Bob, and thank you all for joining us today. So we are, again, talking about psychology and how PES is used on our campus right now. So a little bit of background about myself. I actually happen to be a bachelor's psychology graduate. So although I feel like I use my skills within that program regularly, I also use my philosophy program background as well on a number of basis each day. So what I'm going to go through real quickly is within the PES system, one of the options that you have is to be able to look within specific markets to see where your particular programs fall within that particular market. And then there's some customization options that are open to you. So what I typically try to do is I try to look at where geographically we're in the tropical of the Dakotas. So we're in South Dakota, but we're near the Minnesota, Iowa, and Nebraska border as well. So our geographic region is not necessarily limited by the state itself. So when I look at this particular slide that you're looking at right now, one of the things that I'm looking at is where this particular program, in this case, psychology, lands within the Midwest programs. So I start at the very top and I work my way down and I start to look at kind of where things are ticking up or down. And so as you can see, we're looking at student demand, we're looking at competitive intensity, and also the employment percentile. So again, my particular, if I'm filling out the survey, as far as I believe it's ACS that does the survey, about use of my degree within my particular occupational classification, I am likely one of those who is in that employment percentile where it appears as though I'm not using my degree in kind of a direct prep, but when in turn, actually, I am using it on a regular basis. The other thing that we'll point out really quickly here is this competitive intensity profile. When I'm looking at competitive intensity, I personally think about how our programs are going to differentiate from those that are around me. So I will look within essentially our enrollment radius of 300 miles or so, and I'll take a look at the other programs that are next to me, and I'll talk about what competitive intensity looks like for us. So tables such as this are especially helpful for me. I work kind of in institutional effectiveness throughout my entire career. So a lot of what I'm doing is both asking folks to make data-informed decisions, but part of that is talking through the nuance of the data that they're receiving. So I'll move forward. When we talk about student demand, and thank you, Bob, the Google search volume is typically the #1 indicator that I look at primarily, partially because I believe that we have a nomenclature issue between IPEDS, between Department of Education, and the programs that we're marketing to students. And so I think a lot of times our nomenclature does not match their nomenclature. So they may be thinking right now, and I'll go back to kind of even the Coursera. The programs and the courses that students are looking at right now, I think are a reflection of student well-being, mindfulness, things of that nature, along with some of those market-driven ones, which have to do with sales, HR, et cetera. So we're seeing a reaction right now, and I think that we're seeing that same sort of thing when we talk about student demand. So I like to look at these metrics, like I said, on a pretty regular basis from a standpoint of where are we headed and are there any trains about to leave the station? And the student demand, especially when you're talking about Google search volume, I think is one of the best indicators as to where this program is headed. And when you see an uptick in that, are we using the exact same terminology as those prospective students? Again, within, I believe this is, this must be the Midwest. So the upper Midwest is a region that I created for our particular PES system. And this tells me within, again, that geographic region that I'm searching. And then I can take a look at both the national, the state trends, and the upper Midwest trends. So I start to look at these Google search volumes. And while I see a year-over-year change going down 16%, again, my thought is that this is not necessarily the first indicator of any type of potential problem. Employment is kind of a mixed bag on this one. As I said, part of what we deal with is whether students are thinking about these particular programs as their gateway into a particular career specifically, or what we find on our campus is a lot of students are using our psychology program as a way to get into master's and other graduate level programs as well. So when I look at these numbers specifically, I see a job postings that is in a positive range, but I also feel like we may not have our best finger on the pulse for those job postings because of the generalizability of a psychology program specifically. Historical growth is negative. Oh, go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, let's dig into that a little bit because it's a complicated little issue. There is this thing called direct prep where people assume that you know if you study psychology, you're going to become a psychologist or psychiatrist. And when we go to the American Community Survey, we find out that that's just not true. If you look down at the very bottom of the page there, the red arrow, percent in direct prep jobs, only 5% of psych majors are going to go into a field related to psychology. 95% are going to do something else. That's not a failure. That just means that they took psych for their intellectual development, and that's, you know, they want to do something else with their life. And so that's more common than not, actually. 5% is not a low number for any of your liberal arts and other programs that don't directly prepare you for a specific job. And that doesn't mean people don't get jobs. If you look at that ECS bachelor's outcomes, you can see all the jobs that people normally go into with a psych degree, and there are a lot of them now. Suddenly we're back up to the 99th percentile because it's really an all-purpose degree in practice. You can go into lots of fields, from law to psychology. Some are related, some are not, but that's not really a barrier to getting a job. So I think I'm moving away personally from direct prep at all. I don't think it's a meaningful number for well over 60% of all programs have fewer than 40% of their graduates going into related fields. So it's a concept foisted on us by labor market economists that doesn't really correlate with the real world.
I tend to agree with that. And I think if we were to compare that to a nursing program, very different scenario, very different kind of intentionality by the student. And I think the other part is, as much as we want Department of Education and BLS to kind of catch up on the SIP and SOC codes, we are always going to be woefully behind on what those programs are and what those intended outcomes are going to be. So we'll always be playing catch up. And I think the only time that we'll see the direct prep in line is when we're talking about programs that lead to some sort of licensure, or it's a very clear outcome employment wise for those students. And I think you're right that is probably going to wane as time goes on and more of those generalizable skills are used, especially when we look at things like data science, where
we're going to be updating all this with based on a 70 million person sample of the US population, where we can actually see what the degree was at every degree level and what jobs, not just one job, but all the jobs they've had. So have a much better sense of what do they do when they graduate and what do they do after that. And I think the straight line between a master's degree and a job is going to be much tighter than it is between a bachelor's degree and a job. And doctoral, now you're, law degree, probably going to be in law. So I think it'll vary by degree level and even by individual degree. But you nailed it with nursing. I mean, nursing has about 80% of its graduates going into fields for which they're directly prepared. It is the only program that has that high a link. So it's an evolving thing for us. I think we need to continue to make that data set better so it's more realistic.
Yeah, and I think it goes to the kind of, I'll call it the GUI nature of those matches between SIP and SOC. And then in newer programs, so often I joke about whether students are interested in being drone pilots, and what type of drones are we talking about? What type of preparation will that look like? And then at a certain point, they will likely need to be licensed, and then that direct prep will look slightly different, if not drastically different, at the end of that than it would be if we just put a program on our campus right now and said, do you like to fly drones? Okay, we've got a program for you.
Yeah, that's
so I feel like
I was going to say, I'm not sure I'd recommend that as a job. I think that's one AI will take over within the next 18 months. I think
GPS will do us a lot.
Yeah, I've got 24 months till it gets my job, but drone pilot, that's going away really fast.
Excellent. Yes. Let's see. Job postings, again, this speaks to the same thing that we were talking about as far as where it is that folks land after they complete a bachelor's program. So I've taught a number of courses here on campus. And one of the things that I've noticed as of late is the number of students who are in our nursing program that do a second major in psychology itself. And it is one of those programs that, again, kind of rounds out. We're obviously a liberal arts institution. And so one of the things that we want to do is we want to round out some of those edges of those students to make sure that they go into programs that help them relate to their patients, have a good bedside manner. And then at the end of the day, we're also very vocation focused. So we want to make sure that they are there understanding kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs when it comes to those patients. And so I feel like this gives you an idea of the generalizability, but then also that there are some of those professions that are that lead to better outcomes when a student has a psych background as well.
And we shouldn't skirt around the issue too. Some of these degrees, the next stop is not wonderful. You can see baristas on here, assistant store manager. If you're not careful with what I would call a very general degree, you can have trouble entering the workforce. Keep in mind that may also be the job that they have over the summer while they're getting ready to go to grad school. So we can't be certain that that's somebody who sort got radically underemployed. But I do think that's a concern.
Yep. And I would also offer that with, in the case of grad and other kind of medical school applications, I've seen a larger uptick. In fact, I was talking to one of our graduates last night about the exact same thing, where they're looking into going kind of in that gap year into another master's related program, or doing some preparation, some I'll call it adding to their resume for that application for that next year. So I do agree that this is kind of a snapshot when it comes to outcomes for a bachelor's. So to our point about SOC code matching, again, what you're seeing here is, oh, and I apologize for the type here, but the occupational classifications and the matching between the bachelor's programs do have, I'll call it a mismatch, or essentially an overlap between other types of programs. So you see teachers, you see counselors, judicial workers. I believe social workers is also on this list as well, as far as
I can
folks
read
going
down
to
it.
psych.
It's post-secondary teachers, elementary and middle school teachers, substance abuse counselors, educational and vocational counselors, managers, lawyers, registered nurses, therapists make the list, human resources workers, and medical and health services managers. It's funny, it's fine in my copy, so I don't know what would have gone wrong here, but fire away.
It's probably my display. Yeah, and as you were sharing before about Coursera, that was another thing that I had seen as of late, was that asking folks to look at counseling or look at substance abuse and those sorts of things were ways to create kind of an on-ramp to counseling programs or social work programs as well, to say they may be not necessarily interested in a particular career outcome, but they may be interested in a topical area, and that might gin up some interest to go into counseling, to go into education, etc. Competitive intensity, as I was saying before, competitive intensity to me is one of those where I like to have a conversation with my chairs, with my deans, with my program directors. And this is usually the one that I have the longest conversation with them about, which is who are our competitors within this particular program? And so in a program like psychology, more than likely, you're going to be surrounded by competitors. And the question is, what are their graduates? What type of graduates are we talking about? What is the cost per click? And then the average number of completions. So again, we're going into a time where our particular program on campus, our psych program, is ticking up. We're seeing some of those growth elements that Bob was talking about earlier, but we're also seeing around us that some of these completers are going down in number at some of the other campuses. So they may be going into kind of a melting phase with their particular program. Median program size is healthy, again, dropped 17% year over year. And depending on the size of your program and depending on the size of your campus, that can be a sizable outcome for you. But the last point there about marketing costs are one that you want to make sure that you are paying close attention to. Because again, within competitive intensity, if you're paying a relatively high amount of money in order to get those clicks or in order to market that particular program, you're part of the noise within that marketing program, within that particular region as well.
You know, one of the things that strikes me here, I think people often look at market data and demographic data in particular, by the way, and believe it's their destiny. You know, we hear about the demographic cliff, which by and large doesn't exist, but that's a story for another day. But even if it did, you're in a sector here in psychology where the folks around you are in fact shrinking, but you're not. And I really want to harp on that point that just because the market's tough doesn't mean you can't grow. You just have to do the right things. You have to be smarter than your competition. And fundamentally, it gets down to an old concept in the commercial world. Fortunately, higher ed hasn't had to deal with this level of competition before. But you've got to take share. If the market's going down and you want to sustain your program, you have to attract students who would have gone elsewhere.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and I would say the other part of it is, I think we're seeing on our campus a bump when it comes to how we responded in terms of COVID, how we took care of our students. And my thought is, and maybe I'm being overly generous, that there's only so many programs that you can particularly market in a market before you start to lose attention. And so there is opportunity, and there is opportunity within your own market to both differentiate your program, but then also think about what are the programs that you're putting in front of students right now. So if you're thinking about putting something on a billboard, what is it that's actually going to catch someone's eye, and what is it that they're actually searching for right now? And in my opinion, psych has never had a problem with being forefront of students' minds. I think most students assume that the program or the institutions that they're looking at have a psych program, but I have a feeling if we dug into the data really closely, that we would find a lot of transfer in students to those programs. And sometimes they may be coming from a nursing program, a biology program, or some of your larger programs, and filtering into your psych as well. I know that's what I found when I run the data on our campus.
Yeah, I would disagree with you on one point there. Or a nuance of it, which is, to what extent can you afford to market programs versus market your overall brand and institution? I think you've got to really split what I'll call traditional media, offline media, from online media when you're thinking about that. You can't run billboards for 50 different programs. That I agree with. You can't run TV advertisements for 50 programs. Almost none of you have the money to do that. And even if you did, it probably wouldn't work very well. And similarly for radio, call it traditional media. On the other hand, online, you can be present in as many keywords as you choose to, often with very little or no cost. You pay when people click on you and generate a lead. So thinking about how you do programmatic marketing online, I think is really important, because I've done this experiment with a number of schools where you say, you have a program, let's say in psychology, let's see if we can find it. And we go on and we search for psychology programs in their state. And if they're not doing programmatic marketing, they're invisible. There probably are there somewhere on page 32, but I've never had the patience to get there. It's really an important distinction, I think, because if you've got a program and it's having trouble, or you've got a program and there's a great opportunity, you really need to give it programmatic marketing support, albeit online, for specific keywords associated with that program. And I think it strengthens your offer tremendously when you do that. Again, it's sort of I just want to make that distinction between traditional media and what you can do and non-traditional, or what is now traditional online media.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with that nuance as well, because there is a stark difference between what your cost is for a billboard as opposed to your clicks. And then the other portion of it is how you're presenting your, what's what I'm looking for? Your offer to the students.
Mm-hmm.
And to say, this is what our program is in comparison to the one that you're continuing to look at right now.
Right. And I think students come at the college search from at least two directions. One is they're looking for a brand, and they're searching amongst a group of school names that they know. And they literally, when they come in on Google, they're searching by name. There's another group of students who are interested in a specific program, or perhaps several specific programs. They come in searching by program. And then they look at what schools show up when they search by program. And I just think, that's that you need to be present for both audiences. I'll let you go on with your presentation.
Nope. Thank you. Degree fit, again, I think one of the things that we use in our particular scorecard is, I don't maximize degree fit unless it is a program that I am uncertain about the outcome, or I'm uncertain about the student's intentionality. Again, here we see 91% completions within market. BLS educational attainment, we're looking at 19, 34, and 26 between workforce ed attainment. So again, I don't think that anybody on this call is probably thinking, oh, well, I probably should get in the psychology market. I've never even heard of this before. But if you were, then the degree fit is going to be your friend. And again, I think that goes back to the drone operator, where what we're looking for and what they're looking for and where they're going to likely end up, degree fit is the right set of metrics to figure that out and discern that more closely. So when we talk about students in psychology programs, and we look at DFW rates as well. Again, students typically going into psych programs, stick through programs. What I would like to do in the future is I would like to look at some of those transfer in students, some of those students that are coming into psychology from other programs, and take a look at their DWF rates as well. Because my assumption going into that is that students that come into a psych program as a second or after they have changed majors are likely more successful. And part of that is because they've gone into a general psych class and had a positive experience and felt like they had, it's a confirming bias more so than it is anything else.
Just so you know too, Jay, the labels must have fallen off from a formatting perspective. I apologize for that. They're fortunately still here. So this dot here at 30,000 and about 4,200. Yeah, that's up to the right. There you go. That is psychology. And I was surprised to find that it actually has a somewhat higher DFW rate than average. The average in this group of programs is about 11%, and psych's up there at about 13%, which surprised me. I actually would have thought it'd be right on the average.
Yeah. Yep. Demographics. This is another what I like to point to as far as a differentiator for programs. Our campus is we're predominantly white, and we're slightly more female leaning than we are male. And so when I look at these numbers, depending on kind of what your proposition is to students and what your demographics within your particular region are, and whether those are changing, I go back to these types of tables to have that conversation with programs to talk about, are we seeing an uptick in this case, maybe more males going into psychology, or are we attracting more, or are we seeing more Black, Hispanic students that are interested in these programs? And so this obviously aligns with what we're seeing on our particular campus in our region, but I always like to talk about the demographic change within our particular city. Sioux Falls is growing, and it's becoming much more diverse than it has been in the past. And so to Bob's point earlier, whether you're capturing those students or someone else is capturing those students is really up to you. And are you marketing to them directly? And are you making that proposition to them explicit, saying that we are looking for students of color or male students within these particular programs? I often talk to our deans and our department chairs that I love the scorecards, but they can be a bit of information overload if you don't know what you're looking at. So I'll assume that you know portions of this from what we've talked about before. But the thing to really point out here is the percentile in the upper right-hand corner with that arrow next to it. It's in the 96th percentile. So programs, when we sit down to have these discussions, we'll talk about each of these different sets of metrics, whether it's competitive intensity and employment. But what I like to do is I like to point to them these differences between the total score and the percentile, just to put their minds at ease, to start with knowing that this is a program that is a healthy program as we sit down. And what we're going to do and what we're going to talk about within your program review and all of our discussions are essentially to pick through each of these and see whether what you're seeing on the ground and what you're seeing in the classroom and what you're hearing from our graduates is what I'm seeing within the data as well. Because sometimes we do miss the forest for the trees here. And what I like to do is I like to go through and make sure that they're feeling as healthy as what I'm seeing in their annual checkup, if you will.
I also, with those charts, I like to emphasize the colors.
Yes.
Because you really, the colors are not qualitative, right? They're key to the percentile for that given metric. So if you stick at that level a little bit, you can glance at a chart and quickly understand, oh, it's all dark green for student demand. We're good. It's got a lot, there's a lot of students out there that want to take this. But as you saw on the prior page, it's pink for competition. So we've got to figure out what we do to differentiate ourselves, as you said, Jay. So you can look at it at a lot of different levels of abstraction. And don't ignore the highest level, which is what's red, what's green. And those are areas you want to focus in terms of challenges and opportunity, respectively.
So I'll talk really briefly about kind of our path and what we've been doing. We have been really asking our folks to think about data-informed decisions. So we have a decentralized IR department right now, and the data that I had been pulling in the past had been some iPads, some BLS, but we really didn't have the capabilities when it came to Google search. I've got deans and division chairs and program coordinators that are on board to use PES, but they are reluctant from a standpoint of, I think they're having a hard time discerning what level of data they want to go into and how granular they want to be. When we talk about new program feasibility on our campus, we'll elicit help from Gray, depending on where that program aligns within our current academic portfolio. So I give the example of neuroscience. We developed a neuroscience minor last year, and that appeared to be a slam dunk. There was a number of interested students. I think that might be one of the reasons that we're seeing an uptick within some of our psychology programming right now. And whereas when we went into fintech and our program is launching right now, that one was a bit more, I'll say, gooey when it came to our particular academic portfolio, and then what the offering was as far as the Sioux Falls area and what they were looking for as far as our graduates. What I ask for our program review specifically is that our department chairs and our deans and our program directors take a look at that scorecard and have a discussion with their faculty about what we're seeing at the national, upper Midwest, and South Dakota market. We've started to dig a little bit deeper into the skills and competitors sections of that as well, partially because we get into a point where I want to make sure that our SIP and SOC are overlapping correctly, and that, again, I'm not missing a portion of it. As we were talking before, there is a lot of data nuance. And so I like to have these conversations. What we've started to do is this particular book, and of course, this particular book we've been using on our campus.
What's that last book?
What's that?
What was the second book?
Oh, this one. Have you heard of this one?
Oh, yeah. Start, Stop, or Grow. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
I think I wrote that one.
Yes, you did.
My book plug, sorry.
But we've one of the things that we've been trying to do is have folks sit down and talk about the data and where it's moving. And what we've had in the past is program reports or program reviews that have been done and put on a shelf, and they'll collect dust. And what we need to do is we need to do a more annual review of where we are positionally within the market, what students are looking for, and then how we're meeting that particular need. So I like to put this in front of, like I said, the folks that are in the driver's seat for the program review, and then ask them to reflect on it. So it generates a lot of great conversations when it comes to having coffee and how well these things align. But I appreciate the conversation the same way as when I'm sitting down and I'm assessing curriculum and I'm talking through a curricular map with them as well. It's great conversation to have because it gives me much more information about their health. And I look at it again as kind of a checkup with your doctor each year to say, all right, where are you sitting? What's your heart rate? How are you breathing? How are you feeling?
And then Jay, if you could turn off screen sharing.
I will. Oh no.
That's all right.
Sorry, I've got 3 different screens. There we go.
So let me wrap up for all of you. And while I'm doing our summary, please think about any programs you'd like to see. And I'll turn it over to Winnell in just a minute, and he'd be glad to pull up the national scorecard for an individual program. But to Jay's comments on people and the potential complexity of the scorecard and the need to be looking at this data more frequently, I think Gray has a big burden there. We need to be able to publish reports for you so the numbers that are relevant go out to you at the time that you need them. For example, whenever you've scheduled your program reviews. Other data subsets of our data probably should be going out to you even more frequently to the particular people who care about a given program, for example, knowing that Google search volumes are up for a program is something to get once a month, not once a year. So you can take advantage of a short-term trend that may exist, not by adding a brand new program, but potentially by putting some more focus on it in marketing, or simply being aware that your enrollment in the fall may be higher and being prepared for that. So that burden's on us, I think, to give you reports so your faculty and others don't have to dive into a system to get the data that they need. The other thing we're working on, speaking of AI replacing jobs, this is actually going to do things we can't do today. You can imagine that we can't sit down and handwrite reports for each of 900 programs for each of over 100 clients' custom market definitions. But it turns out ChatGPT can. So we're working on that, and we're learning how to feed numbers into ChatGPT and get really good text summaries of a program back. So your faculty don't have to necessarily come to grips with a program scorecard the way they have historically. They can read a report in plain old English and understand what's going on in their marketplace. So I'm very excited about that prospect. We haven't gotten there quite yet, but I think we'll be able to provide that in the next 12 months. So all of you can read English to understand what's going on with your programs and get that delivered to your inbox when it's appropriate. So what did we discuss today? Fall masters and total enrollment in data analytics, data science left up 57% year over year. That's really an incredible number because this is not a small program anymore. It was at one time, but this is 57% growth in a very substantial master's program. Bachelor's enrollment in data science grew 34%, the fastest of any program at the bachelor's level. Google search volumes for academic programs are up 6% year over year, fastest growth in digital marketing. Total job postings, not such a great story, down 31%, though job postings for loan officers were up 121%. So I'm not sure that didn't change quite rapidly with the change in the banking industry over the last few months. I'm not sure I'd be betting on loan officer jobs, given the failure of SVB and Republic Bank. So, but it did spike, and do recall that overall the job postings are up month over month, and last month's results in March were still higher than any month in Q4 of 2022. So it's still a very healthy level of job postings. Demand for a bachelor's in psychology in the Midwest is high. New student enrollment was at the 99th percentile and grew 3% year over year. A little bit worrisome looking forward. Google search volume was off 16% year over year. So I'd be concerned and keep a careful eye out that we don't see a drop off in interest in that particular program. And generalist job postings were very high, 99th percentile. The direct prep job postings were not great. But as you remember, only 5% of psych majors go into direct prep fields, so it's largely irrelevant. And then we get to Augustana's work. I'm going to turn it back to Jay to talk about what they're doing and to summarize what they're doing.
Yeah, so as I have there, we're tripling down. We are having conversations about this data on a much more regular basis. And part of that is not just to hold people accountable, but so that we have a much clearer picture as to the program health. And that allows us to make better decisions when it comes to investments for marketing, when it comes to investments in faculty lines, offices, space, all of those sorts of things. So it allows us to make sure we're aligning both our financial and human resources. But then the other part of it is, where are we in line or out of line with enrollment projections and with kind of the larger market around us.
Great. So thank you all very much for joining us today. As always, if you would like to learn more, you're welcome to download the presentation itself. That'll be posted in the next few days. We do run this again on Thursday, May 25th at 2 p.m. for four-year colleges. If you're a two-year college or community college, that'll be May 24th. You're welcome to join either one. Second, the book is available if you'd like it. And we also offer a course if you'd like to learn more about program evaluation and management. So lots of different ways to interact with us at very low cost. Now, if anybody would like us to look at a scorecard together, please go ahead and post it in the Q&A or the chat. Anything's fair game. And we'll pull up the national market data for that. With that, I'm going to stop sharing so Wanel can bring his screen up.
Yeah, I think we have a couple minutes left. I did see cybersecurity, so I'll go ahead and just share my screen. And if anything else comes in, please let me know and I will shift. It says my screen share is loading. Has it loaded?
Yep, you're good.
Nice. So the system, again, is going to go out of its way here on the scorecard view to give you a high level overview of what's happening in a given market for a program. In this case, we can kind of lean on the color coding to guide us into areas that are performing well, and then areas that might be in question, right? Immediately, I see student demand for cybersecurity is very strong, both in the size category, I'll zoom in here a little bit, as well as in the growth category, right? And the reason I'm saying that is I'm seeing a lot of dark greens and some light blues here, everything well above average. The most significant size here I see are on-ground completions, but new student enrollments also are very large, and Google search volumes are extremely large at 331,000. Keep in mind, we do have the ability to kind of dive into these 331,000 and figure out exactly what are the keywords that are being searched that are producing this value. Going over to the right, employment.
Now, this is the only program I've ever seen where the size was above the 95th percentile and the growth was at the 99th percentile. That means it's one of the biggest programs in the United States, and it's growing faster than almost any other program in the United States. That's an incredible combination.
Yeah. Yeah, to see that large of a percentage change when the units are this large is tremendous here in this case.
Yeah.
Great. And then, employment, direct prep and ACS bachelor outcomes are very strong here, right? Lots of job posting totals on both sides of the spectrum here, whether it's generalist job opportunities or direct prep job opportunities. And then keep in mind, our system does have a crosswalks tab. I won't open it, but you could see exactly what we are relating to cybersecurity, if you were to enter this crosswalks tab as well, right? Wages are strong too. Well above average here for the mean wages at 79,000 for BLS direct prep. And then this 10th percentile wage, which we like to use as a proxy for entry-level wages at 49,000, are strong as well. When we're looking at the American Community Survey, which is we're looking at bachelor's degree holders in this field, we see wages tend to be a little stronger here for this 30 to 60 or kind of mean wage bucket here at 88,000. Then percentage of direct prep here in this case is very high, but still, under 50% of graduates here that report a bachelor's completion in cybersecurity end up working in a field directly related to cybersecurity, right? And that kind of speaks to that trend where, students don't typically work in a field that's related to their major there.
Yeah, that's actually a pretty high number.
Competitive intensity is, saying -4 at the 50th percentile. I like to pause here and kind of look at what that means, right? Because I never trust kind of the score as all telling in this case. We're going to try and identify why is this a -4? And we're going to notice here that, -2 points are being attributed as a result of the total campuses with graduates. 163 campuses in the national market is putting this at the 94th percentile. So this is being interpreted as very competitive. Average and median program completions here are well above average, 22 average program completions and 11 median program completions. And then Bob always likes to highlight kind of this in-market saturation to give you a sense of how expensive this program might be to market. We're looking at $25 cost per click. This is at the 97th percentile. So, relatively expensive program here at the cost per click level. And then a competition index, which this is from 0 to 1 at a 0.96 here.
Highest number I've ever seen.
Yeah, very saturated. And then if you're going to offer this program, we're going to give you some metrics here in terms of online viability. If you're going to offer this program, you might want to have it online, right? We're looking at 47% of all completions happening online, right? So this
University of Maryland University Global Campus, I think, has a huge percentage share in this space.
Yeah, and that would be kind of speaking here into kind of the online players in this game. There's about 48 institutions that are offering this program fully online. And we would want to dive in, and I'm sure Bob's right there. If we were to dive into who the institutions are, I'm sure University of Maryland is up there.
Yeah, it's particular global campuses across the street from the NSA.
Then all the way to the right, we have the degree fit breakdown, right? This is a program that seems to see completions in a varied award level. We can see certificate all the way up to master's, right? 24% master's, 25% certificate. If I was working with someone on reviewing this program, I'd probably want to dive into the trends associated with the completion percentages, right? Which award levels are growing in terms of completions, but not just that. When we break down the new student enrollment, where is the enrollment trending as well, right? Because completions are a little lagging, right? Because it's an iPad source there. So a bachelor's completion, could be lagging back to kind of 4 years ago when the student decided to enroll into this program versus new student enrollment being very current. So we would want to look at both there to see if we were to enter this market, at what award level would this make the most sense? And I'm sure the Google search volumes would also speak to that as well, where if we're looking at the cybersecurity space, are we seeing a lot of growth and a lot of size around kind of training or course level cybersecurity searches, or are we really seeing growth in, a bachelor's in cybersecurity, for example? And we can dive into all of that in our system. Anything that I missed here, Bob?
Looks good.
I know we're 3 minutes over, so I'll pause there.
Well, thank you all. Very much appreciate your joining us today. I hope you'll be back again next month, and look forward to speaking with you then. I hope our demand trends, that is the pace of growth, will continue to be going up. It is such a relief to be able to talk about search volumes and enrollment and see numbers that are positive. It's been a long time, and it's really a pleasure to see again. And I hope you're all experiencing that. Thank you very much.